I guess we're kind of overwhelmed in some way in terms of the number of you that have turned out for today, so that shows a high degree of interest in what we're trying to achieve. We're certainly looking forward to getting your feedback today, and hopefully this session will give you a chance to understand a bit about our thinking, how we're approaching the solution, and how we pose to manage and work with it going forward. My scope covers the All-of-Government program. It also covers the 60 or so syndicated contracts that we've got out there in the marketplace, and also working with GCIO and also the Property Management Centre of Expertise in terms of their establishment of common capability contracts. I guess the key kind of thing throughout all of this is collaborative. It's in the title, it's in the name, and that's really important. It's actually around how government's working together going forward and actually aligning between government agencies. We find there's a lot of uniqueness in terms of what government does, but there's also a high degree of commonality, and the whole idea behind the common capability contracts is leveraging that commonality for the benefit of government, but also for the benefit of the supply market. The slide's a little bit old, but it still carries I think tells quite a good story. And we're actually in the process of updating that. The kind of view down the bottom there, we think the government spends around $30 billion a year on goods and services. You take out salary and wages and transfer payments. We've done some work recently, and we're actually in the process of revising that number up. But what it does say is that there is a very broad range of spend when you look at the 280 or so government agencies that compile that, plus the 2,400 odd schools and the 78 local territory authorities that make up public service. The All-of-Government program itself and All-of-Government contracts have a lot of focus. I guess in perspective, it's only one aspect of things. Last year, probably around about 750, maybe $800 million went through the 14 established All-of-Government contracts, and about $250 million went through the 60 or 70 syndicated contracts out there. So that means there's probably close to $29 billion that agencies are spending that are outside that contract framework, and that's why the whole the slide up there titled "Strive for Procurement Excellence" is that a key role of the government procurement branch is actually shaping procurement excellence for the benefit of New Zealand. And so it's the shaping on the $29 billion is where a large degree of our focus goes. I guess a key point from the slide as well is that we've also got a lot of tenders that go through the GETS process, Government Electronic Tendering Service, and that's a really important aspect for us as well in terms of agencies consistently going through that and being clear to the supply market on what they want. Recent initiatives such as the RFX guidelines and templates we've put out are one of the key ideas behind that in terms of making it easier for our suppliers on a consistent basis to understand what government agencies are looking to procure. There's a number of kind of key themes that the government procurement branch as part of MBIE is in place to support, and these are based around the government's four key priority areas. The first one around managing the government finances. The program was put in place in 2009. We always thought it'd be about a 10-year change process in terms of striving for procurement excellence in New Zealand. We're probably halfway through that now. But one of the key aspects behind the program initially was that the government could get better value out of that spend that was put in place, and the All-Government program was part of that initiative. In terms of building a more competitive, productive economy, that's pretty critical for us. If New Zealand wants to get to 40% of GDP coming from exports by the year 2025, we need to grow our productive sector. The announcement last week around New Zealand succeeding to the government procurement agreement for the WTO opens up potentially up to a $2 trillion market for New Zealand business to go after. And a whole part of the whole simplification that MBIE's put in place in terms of the rules of procurement are designed to enable New Zealand firms to go offshore and for us to have fair access to overseas markets. And in return, the rules of sourcing that we now use as a key cornerstone for procurement in New Zealand are based around New Zealand's international trade obligations. Rebuilding Canterbury has been a key area for MBIE as an organisation, but also for the government procurement branch. We've got a team focused inside the government procurement team in terms of supporting Canterbury, doing a lot of work with Sarah. And one of the interesting areas about the Canterbury rebuild, and a lot of you have probably got interest down there, is that in many cases it's business for everyone. It's how do you manage the other aspects of our procurement and supply chain. We have got an unprecedented demand coming through, and if you look at the work that the Productivity Partnership Other organisations have done on modelling the growth out of Canterbury, and also a large growth program out of capital out of Auckland. New Zealand's really in line for an unprecedented economic boom in terms of construction. Consequently, that has pressure and incentives in place in terms of how the whole procurement supply chain aspect is managed, and we're doing our piece to try to assist in that process. The last there, but by no means the least, delivering better public services is pretty critical. Starts off from the work led by Sir Martin Weavers in terms of better public services, and the idea behind the government's theme that you actually, by agencies working better together, you can support the government to achieve their 10 key result areas. You don't need to change organisational structure in a large way in terms of public service entities to get better results. And what I've found in the last 2.5 years in this role is there is a genuine theme of collaboration coming through between government agencies. And so we've got government agencies that want to work together, they want to partner, they want to leverage the expertise, and that's a really powerful thing. We see that coming through. Agencies want to participate in the government program. We've seen that coming through in terms of agencies supporting MB to stand up this consultancy services solution. This is probably the single strongest contract where agencies have said, how fast can you establish this? We want this in place as soon as possible, and you're doing tranche 1 now, and that's fantastic, but when does tranche 2 and 3 come out? And I know that's probably a question that some of you will have today as well. So we've had great support for this, and it's given us a lot of confidence and also some very good grounds to tease out our thinking and to critique that with government who we want to be the key users of that. In terms of the program as a whole, we've got over 700 agencies now participating in the program. That includes 15% of schools, that includes 100% of your core public service entities, that includes 95% of your SOEs, your universities, your tertiary education institutes. It also includes 95% of your local and territory authorities. And those later organisations have got total choice and discretion in terms of wanting to participate in the program. The fact they do, we think, is a very, very good sign of their willingness to look for good value, and we encourage that for the consultancy solution as well. So this is my last slide. I'll hand over to Susan. So the top slide there is this large degree of participation. On the www Procurement website, we've got a little A3 that you can access on that, and it's the clearest way we can actually portray how government is structured in terms of participation by government agencies in the program. Pretty much in the top red core there, you've got the core government agencies who have always been required to participate in the program unless they've got good reason not to, and that is quite a key point to take away. Now, there is an expectation government agencies will be involved in the program, but one of the key tenets behind establishing government procurement is that agencies remain accountable in terms of chief executives for their procurement decisions. And so if they see good reason not to participate in a contract, then we can have that conversation. What we look for is clarity in terms of rationale for the reason not to participate. Last year, the 103 state service entities who were previously encouraged to participate in the program, they've been required to participate from 1 February next year to comply with the government rules of sourcing. That includes the expectation they'll also be involved in the all-of-government contracts. But look, we've got very, very high participation across from those agencies already. So in a way that really does make a large degree of change. What we want in terms of agencies participating in the contracts is they see the value for doing so and they're willing participants as opposed to feeling that they're mandated and required. Because we're very focused inside the branch in terms of the value prop that our contracts offer and agency satisfaction. Likewise, we're very interested as well in terms of supplier willingness and desire to participate and the fact that you see the contracts working for yourselves. If not, that's critical for us to understand because we do want to have longevity out of this contract mix, and as part of that we want to make sure that there's a winning value proposition for all those that are involved in the process. So I guess the bottom left there, AOG offers providers access to eligible agencies. One thing we do want to do is make it easier to onboard in terms of business opportunities with government agencies and tying away those core terms and conditions so when you are engaging with different agencies, there is no longer a requirement to negotiate terms and conditions, which can often be quite frustrating, time consuming for minimal additional benefit. One of the key things we see out of the construct we've put in place is the fact by having those core terms conditions locked down, it's much easier to engage with agencies on the substance at hand, which is the consultancy services they're looking to realise to realise their business goals. I guess a key caveat, the bottom right there, about AOG does not offer providers guaranteed business or sales. You still need to be able to demonstrate your value add. The way we put the construct in place on this, we want to give suppliers much greater promotion and visibility of your skills, your expertise, your references, your track record, your value prop, and to enable agencies to make more informed decisions around the consultants they choose to work with. Susan.
Okay. So the first tranche of consultancy covers the initial business and finance subcategories. So finance and economics, audit and assurance, which you'll note if you've read the RFP are now two separate categories. Procurement and logistics, accounting and taxation. So this is a breakdown of how that looks in terms of what we know about government expenditure in these subcategories. So the tranche is worth around $51 million. Consultancy as a whole is around $800 million. So this is a very small tranche. We wanted to do the smallest one first so that we could make sure that we got it right, that we'd have the time to do that, and we weren't taking on anything that was too enormous. We did some extensive consultation with government agencies and with the supply market in 2013 around consultancy services, and we got a lot of useful information back from both parties. And what we got back was actually pretty consistent. Both sets of suppliers said they wanted, both sets of stakeholders said they wanted a transparent solution that was open and accessible, that drove efficiency and was easy to engage with, and that rewards quality and has a quality management approach. And also that delivers value for money. Now, and that's value for money not just to our government agencies, which is extremely important. I'm a procurer, I make no apology for that, but also to the supply market, because it needs to be good value for you guys to be part of this as well. So to address this, we came up with the tier solution, which is what you'll have all seen in the RFP. We looked at this because of the complexity of the supply market, the range of suppliers that there are in the supply market, and the variance between the kinds of work that are given out to the different tiers within the supply market. So tiers 1, 2 and 3. This isn't necessarily the big guys, the medium-sized guys and the small guys. It doesn't have to work that way. It's all down to the quality that you can provide, the expertise that you provide across a number of our subcategories, and the amount of management that we want to give you in terms of being a supplier to government. So from quite a heavy touch through to a lighter touch with our tier 3 providers. And it means that if you are a small sole trader and you still want to be able to provide into government, you can do that without it being onerous on you in terms of the reporting demands that we place on you. But equally, if you're a large key supplier to government, it means that we can work closely with you on the work that you undertake for government. So how does this solution meet those 5 key things that our stakeholders told us that they wanted? Let's go back. So transparency, there'll be extensive evaluation of all 3 tiers, although obviously that'll be a sliding scale, so the more extensive evaluation will happen in tier 1. The engagement process will be clear and it will be as concise as we can make it and widely communicated to both government agencies and to the supply market. The panel is an open panel. Normally our AOG contracts are closed panels, which don't allow for new entrants to the market. This is an open panel because we appreciate that consultancy is a dynamic and changing environment, and new players come into the supply market all the time. So it's an open panel that we hope will be accessible for both government agencies and suppliers to use. Efficiency and ease of engagement, we will be working very closely with our government agencies on how they engage with you as suppliers and how easy they can make that for you, while still being a robust process in terms of selection. There'll be a quality ranking and framework around this. We will be monitoring the ongoing quality that the consultancy firms on the panel provide to our government agencies. We'll be asking our government agencies about the quality of service that they are receiving from you, and we will be using that to report on the quality that's provided under the contract and also to rank providers based on those quality assessments. And through that quality assessment, we will also be doing a value for money assessment. Now, I should stress here that the main driver behind this tranche of the consultancy services category is quality. That's what we will value above everything else. That's not to say that we won't ask you for price. You'll have seen from your RFP that we ask you for exactly that. But quality is our main driver. So what are the characteristics of the 3 tiers? Where you sit on the tiers will be determined by a number of things, and you are asked in the RFP to suggest which tier you would like to be in. The tier characteristics will be based on the number of subcategories that you can provide into as a provider, the eligible agency revenue threshold, and by that we mean how much business you feel you are likely to do or may indeed already be doing with government. The proprietary models, frameworks and IP that you hold as a consultancy and what you bring to that. And the robustness of the RFP, of the thoroughness of the RFP evaluation. As I said earlier, we will be evaluating Tier 1 quite extensively. Tier 2, still quite an extensive level of evaluation, but not quite as in-depth as Tier 1. And Tier 3 is another step down again following that. There's also service levels that you provide under the contract, so what's expected of you in terms of the services that you deliver both to our government agencies but also to us as a centre of expertise in terms of the reporting that you provide to us. The levels of reporting will be slightly different for each of the 3 tiers as well. And the contracts will be the same for Tiers 1 and Tier 2, but very different for Tier 3, recognising that Tier 3 will be made up predominantly of very small suppliers. Administration fee will also be different across the 3 tiers. Administration fee will apply to Tiers 1 and 2, but not to Tier 3. The administration fee is a fee that we levy on government agencies for their participation in our contracts, and the way that we collect that is to ask you as our suppliers to add that to your invoices that you give to the government agency. We then bill you for that to pay on to us. So the administration fee is used for a wide variety of things. It doesn't just pay for me and my team here. It pays for some of the good work that we do in government procurement branch around building capability across government in the procurement space and building the work of our government agencies and their competence as procurers to make your engagement with them that much easier. If they're knowledgeable and they know what they're doing in terms of scoping something, then that makes your engagement with them that much easier. So what are the benefits? This is a straight lift from the RFP. So if you've seen the RFP, you'll be familiar with this. The benefits are obviously very different across the 3 tiers. But I think the one that goes across all of them is the promotion to government agencies. So we will have a provider database, and I'll talk about that in a minute, which will have the listing of all of the consultancy providers that are signed up to this contract available to our government agencies so that they can see who you are, what you can provide to them, how much you charge, an assessment of your quality, and also some references from maybe your recent customers that could be posted up there as well, including CVs of key consultants who work within your business. So in terms of the provider database, this includes information on all of the tiers, as I've said, and all suppliers across all tiers. And it will contain information which includes things around the quality scores, so the ongoing quality assessment of you as providers as we move through management of the contract, the rates that you provide, any CVs, work history, and of course your contact details. Rates, I have to say, you will not be able to amend those yourself. We will amend those as the COE, but most of the other information you will be able to update yourselves to ensure that it's up to date and that it's accurate. So some key dates around the project. As you know, the RFP hit the market on the 28th of October. The due date for that back is the 5th of February to take into account Christmas and to give you time to respond to the RFP. We have a clarification period that's going on at the moment, so if you do have any questions that you want to ask around the RFP, then please do submit them through the GETS website. We ask that you do that rather than submitting it directly to us as a COE, just so that we can be transparent and we can audit any responses that we make to any questions that we receive. We're looking at a contract award date of around the middle of next year, with commencement in the middle of next year as well. As I mentioned, this is an open panel, so we intend to return to the market at least annually to bring on new providers to the panel. And the contracts under the panel will also be evergreen because of the open nature of the panel. We didn't see any point in putting in an arbitrary termination date for these contracts if this was an open panel where providers could come and go. So the contracts will be evergreen. That's not to say that we won't terminate them if we feel the need to, or that we won't scrap the panel and start again should we feel the need to either. I hope neither of those things happen. This has been painful enough as it is. So just again, an indicative timeline. Q4, we'll release the RFP. We met that one, so that's good. Q1 of next year, we'll close the RFP with evaluations in Q1 and Q2. Evaluators will be taken from our government agencies, so we will choose a selection of evaluators across all of our government agencies, both from our core agencies and going out to local authorities, smaller agencies as well. The key for us is people who have expertise in engaging with consultants so that they know what to look for when they're evaluating your RFPs. And then contract award in the middle of next year. And you'll see running through that the line that says that concurrent tranche 2 development. We call this tranche 1. It's actually tranche 1 of 4. This is the first one and the smallest. The others that we have are the other business and finance categories, ICT and property and construction. We'll be working very closely with specialists in those areas when we come to issue those tranches to the market. We don't know when these tranches will be released to the market yet. Part of that development will happen while tranche 1 is out there and you're looking at the RFP. So we know what the tranches will be, we just don't know when we're going to release them to the market. So just to preempt some of the questions that we might get, do you have to be a panel member in order to supply my services to provide your services to government? As Grant said earlier, we have our core agencies who are expected to participate and our wider government agencies who are encouraged, required to participate. If they have good reason not to participate, then they don't have to. If they come to the panel and find that the panel can't meet their needs, then they can go outside of the panel. So there are opportunities to provide outside of the panel, but of course being on the panel provides you with a much wider scope of opportunity in terms of being able to provide to the whole of government. So will lowest cost providers win the majority of the contracts? I can say categorically no on that. And the reason that I can be so assured in that answer is one of the contracts that I look after is the AOG recruitment contract. And what we found on the AOG recruitment contract is that our agencies are gravitating towards the suppliers that can provide them with a good service. They are not necessarily the cheapest, and in some instances they are actually the most expensive. And we anticipate that that's exactly what will happen here. How will we measure quality? And will you be able to see your quality score and your ranking? We'll monitor quality through feedback from our government agencies and the feedback that they give you as our suppliers. We will collate that and we will monitor that and we will feed that back to you and show you what that's done to your quality score and to your quality ranking. So you will be able to see your own individual ranking, but not that of your competitors. So you'll see where you stand in the field, but not who's standing there with you. And our government agencies will see everything. So they will see where all of the suppliers are ranked across government. So you will be able to see it and you'll be able to discuss it, and we will share with you how we calculate those quality scores. What's the main benefit offered to Tier 3 providers? And I touched on this earlier. It's about visibility. It's about getting your name out there in front of government and people knowing who you are. And if you do a good job, then that's recorded on the provider database on the IT solution for everybody to see. And that's a really good reference to have. How often can you adjust your rate card? And can you increase and decrease your prices? You can decrease your prices at any time. We're good like that. The prices for Tiers 1 and Tier 2 will be fixed for the first 2 years of the contract. Now you'll note from the RFP that we've asked for maximum prices. We fully anticipate government agencies wanting to negotiate below that when they have a particularly attractive piece of work or indeed a large volume of work that they want to put your way. But that maximum price is fixed for the first 2 years, and after that it will be reviewed on an annual basis. So you can move down at any time, upwards. We're a little tougher on that. If you have no previous engagement history in the public sector, you will be treated exactly the same way as someone who's been working with government for years. You will be promoted in exactly the same way, and all of the information that's contained on our database will be exactly the same for you. So you will have exactly the same level of opportunity. Your quality will be assessed in exactly the same way. Your RFP response will be assessed in exactly the same way. So you should not be disadvantaged just because you haven't provided into government before. As long as you've got customers who are prepared to stand by the quality of service that you provide to us, that's fine. And how often will we allow for new intakes? As I said earlier, we're looking to go at least annually to the market. If we see the need to go more frequently than that, then we will, but it will be at least annually to go back to the market. So I hope that preempted some of your questions, but I'm sure there are more that we haven't thought of. So if you'd like to, Patrick has our roving mic, so I'll open the floor.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is focused around the differentiation between Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3. The RFP states fairly categorically, as I read it, that you need 500,000 revenue with the government to qualify for a Tier 2. You mentioned that it's actually what you expect to be able to generate in revenue, so if you could clarify that. And your last point there that says providers who currently have any business with the Crown, well then they are automatically, as per the RFP, prevented from getting into Tier 2. Could you clarify those 2 points?
To take the first point first, the 500,000, in order to be fair to suppliers who don't currently provide into government, we can't just say it's $500,000 to government because there are a lot of people who are new to supplying to government and won't have that level of business. But given the experience, expertise of your business and the capacity of your business as well, and the capacity I think is the biggest thing. Would you have the capacity to service government at that $500,000 level? The second question around if you're already provided to the core Crown, you won't get into Tier 2. That's not strictly true. We do have an awful lot of core Crown providers who fit very, very neatly into that Tier 2, given the analysis of the market that we've done and the amounts that are spent with different consultancies. So we do expect across all three tiers a broad range of providers who currently provide to the Crown as well as those who don't.
So, yep. So pretty much the same question, Susan, just to be really clear on this one. So what I'm just trying to be clear on is what is the advantage between Tier 2 and Tier 3 for a supplier? That's the first question.
So the difference in benefits between the two. The advantage of being in Tier 2, I guess, is the access to the larger pieces of business, although that's not to say that if you're in Tier 1 you couldn't do those as well. In Tier 3 you couldn't do those as well. But in Tier 2 it's a much closer managed relationship with us as the centre of expertise. So you'll get a much more hands-on approach from us in terms of promoting you, managing our relationship with you. The Tier 3 is going to be very much more a transactional relationship. It won't have that strategic element to it that is more likely in Tier 1 and Tier 2.
Okay, so just picking up on the previous gentleman's question then, because the proposal summary document on page 5, it actually says, based on the last financial year, that you must exceed 500,000 in total across in the relevant subcategory you're applying for to be in Tier 2. So that's a little bit at odds with what you're saying, where because part of what some of my clients and myself are looking at is, well, this is an opportunity to ramp up. So we do expect to have capacity to do more work in those categories, but they might not necessarily have had that in the last 12 months.
I think the key is proving that you have that capacity. So it isn't. If you can prove that you have that capacity to do that business now, then we will take that into consideration when we evaluate your RFP. Okay.
So the next flow-on question from that is then if you then build up that capacity over the next ensuing year or so, and the level of income that comes with that, are you then eligible to go up a tier?
Absolutely. Sorry, I should have covered that off in the presentation. You are absolutely able to move up the tiers. So if you start in Tier 3 and within 12 months you've got $750,000 worth of business in one subcategory with government, then yes, we would happily take you up into Tier 2 if you met the criteria for Tier 2. Yeah.
Just sort of continuing this theme of the $500,000 threshold, and you partially answered the question I had, but there's a remaining piece. I just wanted to test that you're not inadvertently creating a difficult threshold for people to enter Tier 1 and Tier 2 with that threshold in the assurance subcategory. If you look at the figures of for the tranche of total consulting services been around, I think, 20 million for the year 2011-2012. I think about 11% of that is estimated to be the assurance worth, which is about $2 million odd dollars. That's only $4 $500,000 chunks, and it sounds about right in terms of our informal understanding of the market in government at the moment. About $2 million of that sort of assurance work. So for people to have evidence that they were, a quarter or more of that in a recent year, there will be very few people who can do that. Perhaps of the Tier 1, the traditional Big 4 consulting companies, perhaps only one or two of them, and certainly of existing Tier 2 companies, perhaps only one or two of them. So as long as you're comfortable that that's the size of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 pools that you will have, I just wanted to check that you've thought through that. Thanks.
Yeah, I think One thing to note about the tier structure is that it doesn't matter where you are in a tier. If an agency wishes to use you, they can. Just because you're in tier 3 doesn't mean that they can't use you for tier 1 work, although there isn't going to be such a thing as tier 1 work. So just because you're in tier 3 doesn't mean that an agency can't use you for a particular project or a particular piece of work. So we appreciate that across the subcategories, the sizes of the tiers will be different. And a lot of that is to do with the number of players that there are in the individual subcategories. So yes, it is something that we have considered.
Right. What's in it from the perspective of participating agencies to choose a tier 1 versus a tier 2 versus a tier 3?
There should be no difference in why they would choose a tier 1, a tier 2 or a tier 3. It's who they want to work with, the particular piece of work that they have, the size and scale of that particular piece of work, and the expertise of the providers that they can get in to do that piece of work for them. If they take all of those things into consideration, and it's a piece of work that could be done in any one of the 3 tiers, then where that supplier comes from should make absolutely no difference to the participating agency.
Thanks. Susan, did I read the RFP correctly that tier 3 providers won't need to have... Did I read the RFP correctly that tier 3 providers won't need to have professional indemnity assurance?
That's a detailed question that I'm afraid off the top of my head I don't know the answer to. So
The answer is that's what the RFP says. Yep.
I have my personal assistant here who's just said that. So if that is yes as the answer, what I would say though is that part of this, we expect government agencies to do a secondary procurement process which we will work very closely with them in terms of developing, and as part of that they may place a requirement on a tier 3 provider to have that indemnity insurance.
If you're a tier 3 or a tier 2 provider, and an occasion comes up when it would make more sense for you to partner or subcontract with a tier 1 provider, can you do that and then go back to your tier 2 or tier 3 status? I.e., can you mix and match depending what the opportunity is?
Yeah, because the tiering is linked to you as an organisation, not necessarily to the people that you partner with. So yeah, we would absolutely be open to you partnering with people in tiers above or below you, wherever you were. One thing we do appreciate is that the consultancy market is quite fluid, and we have independent contractors who will work on their own, but may also contract to some of the bigger players in the market as well. And so the tiering system allows for that and allows for that flexibility.
Can we have some assurance that as a registered contractor, that all the details required by the multiple agencies for their own peculiar reasons will be compiled up front? For instance, if you bid for work with Inland Revenue, you'll have your tax declarations on file. If you have, every agency has all these things added on in the RFPs. Are they going to be dealt with once up front, or are we still going to have to face that for every contract? Because that's what really takes time, energy and effort in every bid, and it's a real nuisance.
We will work very closely with our government agencies in how they approach the panel and what kinds of things that they ask for. And wherever possible, we will make that information available to all of our government agencies so that they do only ask you that question once.
Sorry, one more question. Will the work be issued by the Crown agencies out to the panel for the panel to bid on, or will it be direct single source to individual panel members?
As I said, one of the big things around this is that how government agencies interact with the panel, and we will be developing some secondary procurement process guidelines for our government agencies. So the answer is it will probably be a mix of those things. There will be instances when they will go out competitively to the panel. They may choose to establish their own sub-panels, or they may just intend to single source. And a lot of that will depend on the individual agency's processes that they have themselves, and a lot of that will also be guided by us in terms of secondary procurement process guidance that we develop with them.
One of the things you mentioned was around the tiering structure, that you have to prove your capacity. And when you look at capacity, what factors would you be considering in the capacity? I.e., for multinationals, will you be considering the whole international capacity, or are you just going to focus on the New Zealand capacity that they have?
So it's more around how quickly people can upskill to meet the demands of the panel, and how quickly they can access a resource. If that involves going overseas to bringing that resource, then that's part of the capacity that we will assess. If it means that they have a very good capacity base and a good resource base already in New Zealand and don't need to do that, then we'll also assess that as well. But obviously, if resources can be brought in quickly from overseas, then that contributes to easily accessible capacity.
Thank you. So just a few fine-tuning ones, Susan, in regard to financial viability. Two things. First of all, some of my clients have a bit of a problem disclosing their deepest, darkest secrets of finances in an RFP process, and I guess what you're looking for is proof of profitability. Is there an alternative proof of profitability that's acceptable? Is the first question.
We want to make sure that the people that we're dealing with are solvent and that we can work with them in the long term. As Grant mentioned, one of our key issues is around longevity and making our processes sustainable. So we would need to ensure that anybody that we engaged with could meet those standards. I don't want to commit now to saying that there is an alternative, but if a clarification question put that through gets, and we'll give you a much more considered answer than I can give you now.
Yep, thank you. And just while you're on that same topic then, the mandatory criteria says that for Tier 3 financial viability is not required, but in the questions for Tier 3 it asks you to fill out the financial viability form, so there seems to be a conflict there.
Well spotted. Again, if you put that in as a clarification question on GETS, we'll respond to that in a more considered way to make sure that everybody gets the same answer.
In the both the presentation and the RFP, you talk a fair bit about quality. What are the actual quality criteria that we're going to be assessed against?
I think they're pretty well detailed in the RFP, and we give you our evaluation criteria and the weightings that we've put against them in the RFP. When we put this slide pack together, we had the quality criteria up, and I took it out because I thought it was too detailed, and I now wish I'd left it in. But the quality criteria is as detailed in the RFP, and the RFP questions will be used to assess against that quality criteria.
And is that the case for the ongoing operation of the panel?
The ongoing operational quality will be measured against the service levels that are detailed in the RFP, and also they're set out in the contract that's attached to the RFP as well. And the questions that we'll ask to monitor those service levels are in there as well.
It's about tiering again, and I guess it's just a matter of clarification really. Can you just confirm that you're looking for, the tier will cover all the categories? In other words, you can't be category 2 in one for one and tier 3 for another category? I'm
going to keep an eye on my team in the corner of my eye here, and I'm going to say that you won't necessarily be in the same tier for every single subcategory. It will depend on what you can provide to the panel. So if you have particular expertise in 2 or 3, you may be tier 1 in that, but in the 3rd and 4th you may be tier 2 or tier 3, or you may not even be included in the tiers at all if you have no capability in those areas.
And so the level of business that you do in financial terms, could that be aggregated across the categories?
Yes, and for tier 1 we're asking for $1 million with 500,000 in the specific subcategory that you're asking for, and in the other subcategories, then if you just want to be appointed to one subcategory in tier 2, then it's $500,000 in that particular subcategory.
In the legal services panel that you set up, you had a potential conflict of interest between Crown Law and external legal service provider, which you managed. Are there any examples in any of the tranches here where the government is a provider of services which competes with the with the private sector, and how will you manage those?
So at the moment, interagency transactions aren't subject to the rules of sourcing or the need to advertise on GETS, is my understanding. As part of this, for example, we have excluded Audit New Zealand in terms of the services they provide to government agencies. So on a case-by-case basis, we will consider that, and we're working through those examples as they come up. One very good example is assurance services. So we've been working with the GCIO in terms of their responsibility to provide assurance services to government. They can do that through their own means, or they can do that through assurance providers. As we outline in the RFP, the arrangement we're proposing to put in place with GCIO is that we will form the assurance subcategory and panel, and GCIO then will form their own sub-panel of assurance providers that they're looking for to support them in their assurance activities. So we're going to deal with it on a case-by-case basis as that transpires.
In the case of the government's own commercial services team, is that a consulting team or a contracting team? How is that managed in terms of conflict?
I think part of your question is what is contracting and what is consultancy as well. There is in my view, in the COE, there is a continuum of contracting services and consultancy services. We'll be dealing with that in terms of what's appropriate for the services that that commercial pool is providing and the best fit for the solution.
Just a question on the procurement and logistics subsection. If I was a fairly specialised or had a niche market and I wanted to go for a particular type of work, where could I get information which would sort of give me a feel for how much work is out there through this contract as a percentage of the total? So for example, if I was a transportation engineering consultancy and I wanted to bid for procurement work, where would you go for that sort of information?
So we've sized this, and Susan mentioned the $51 million for this tranche, and also the $800 million odd, based on feedback we've got from government agencies in terms of what they spend on consultancy services, and we've cross-checked that to feedback from the supply market in terms of our request for information in 2013 and an earlier exercise we had done. There is some paucity and that's some information and some variance. So we think that's indicative. We won't know the detail until we actually start transacting through the contract and understand what the activity is going through those different subcategories.
Your pricing model is based on rates, and based on rates in terms of years of experience, essentially. So how are you going to align rates from suppliers which might be based on a different basis on directors or partner level or various degrees of skill levels, which may not be based directly around a time in the particular role? And how will that be comparable, I guess, across agencies and time?
I think the model that we've got around pricing has 5 levels of consultant. Only one of the criteria is around length of experience. There's also information in there around the type of skill sets and the type of jobs that are undertaken, and we give some indicative titles as well of roles that may fit in each of those 5 levels. So I think there is flexibility in there to allow for other things to be considered other than the length of experience that somebody has in a particular area.
Just coming back to the partnering and associate model topic earlier, is there any restriction, or what's the situation in terms of appearing, for example, as an individual or a smaller company in multiple pitches to this? So as an individual, we might be in tier 3, we might partner or associate with others to band together for a large relationship type thing.
I think that comes down to personal choice and how you want to operate in the market. And as I said earlier, we're aware that consultants are quite flexible in how they work. So they may want to work on their own, or they may want to work with a larger firm or with a few others. And this solution provides a way to be able to do all of those things. So you can either come on as a sole consultant, or you could band together with others if they were in a higher tier than you, or even in the same tier as you.
A clarification on that. The key word there was or. So is it possible to and?
Oh yes, sorry. It's if you're on as a sole contractor and you want to be part of another contract with another firm that's in a higher tier, absolutely. It allows for that flexibility of movement across those companies. But as I said earlier, your original appointment as an independent would be in whichever tier you'd been appointed to in that subcategory.
Is there anything to stop somebody appearing as an associate or a subcontractor on one person's proposal to get onto this panel, but also either on their own as a specialist or with yet another party's proposal? So can you appear on more than one bid to get onto the panel?
My initial response to that is going to be yes, you can do that, but I would like you, if you could submit that, because I think that's quite a key question for a lot of people. If you wouldn't mind submitting that through the website, and we'll get a much more considered response to it. But at the moment, I can't see any reason why that wouldn't be the case, but do allow us the opportunity to give you a more considered response on that.
Okay, thank you. And just as a sub-question on that, it does ask under that capabilities assessment question, which is marked and weighted, are your services provided by a third party, or are they provided by people on your staff? Is there a suggestion then that associate relationships or subcontract relationships that might be entered in that box are viewed negatively?
I don't think there'd be a negative view. I think it's just an assessment of, and it goes back to the capacity issue and how quickly you can skill up to do a particular piece of work. Obviously, if you have a large, fully employed group of resource that you can call on, that's probably much easier than calling on subcontractors. But equally, having that facility to call on the subcontractor gives you much more flexibility around how quickly you can respond and how quickly you can upsize and downsize again. So I don't think it's as simple as it would be looked at negatively.
Thanks. My question is for both this tranche and for the other tranches. If your organisation's already on a agency panel or a group panel, does these arrangements, how do they work with other existing panels that are operating? Does it mean the other panels are stopping as at July next year, or do they carry on?
So as in terms of this contract and all other all-government contracts, existing commitments that agencies have made stay in force until a point of termination or cessation. We're going to encourage government agencies to transition onto our consultancy services solution as quickly as possible. We think it's going to provide really good value and give them a great solution. If they've got a preference to carry on utilising their existing arrangements, they have the choice to do so until the point of expiry for those.
Yeah, I've got a question a bit about the timetable. You're saying here that questions close for respondents on the 22nd of January and then need to get everything in by the 5th of February. But I presume part of this feedback will probably lead to some revisions of the proposal forms and stuff. So I'm just wondering if you thought about when you will actually close off revisions to that, because it seems like there's been some questions here that might change those proposals. There might be some future clarification.
Might we revisit those timelines? Possibly. What's really important is that we'll go away and we'll consider carefully the feedback and questions we've had today. And what's very important is the clarification and questions from yourselves keep coming through GETS, because that's the formal repository for us to action those, and we'll respond accordingly. I guess if I step back, we don't know what we don't know. We've never done this before of this scale. We're trying to do something that reflects a very broad market. It's very diverse, and the questions that have come through today and our interactions with the provider market up to now have demonstrated that. What we're trying to put in place is a flexible framework that's going to give you the ability to effectively promote yourselves to government, have a lower transaction cost for engaging, and make it easier for government agencies to appraise, identify and engage with you for your services. We've taken a tranche model, a small tranche initially to see how it goes, and we're going to tweak it and refine it going forward. That's our commitment. We're going to listen, we're going to tweak it, and we're going to work hard to make it happen. If the feedback from the supply market and agencies that got it wrong, we'll look to change it. We'll go away and we'll revisit the timelines. Right now we're confident that they give a good opportunity for you to understand what we're looking for and to respond. If the feedback and requests, we need to revisit those, we'll do so.
Thank you. So just, I guess, a couple of comments. One is this is the 8th all-of-government contract I've been involved in, and I'd say it's by far the easiest and by far the cleanest. So while some people might be thinking this is hard work, this is actually the best so far, I'd say. The second thing is just there's been quite a bit of discussion around contracting with other parties, and just in the contract it's got a clause about that. I just wonder if the clause is at odds with those discussions, because it does say the provider will not subcontract the performance or all or part of a services without the prior written consent. So just wonder if that's at odds.
I don't think it's at odds. I think we're saying that you can do it, and you just need to tell us that you're going to do it.
If you're on a panel, you can sort of mix and match with other suppliers, is what you're saying. Yep.
And if you are entering into a subcontracting relationship with someone, you just need to tell us that that's what you're doing, and I don't think it's at odds at all.
Is there any greater definition of what some of the subcategories or the tranches involve? For example, some of the work that I'm involved in, I would have thought would fit under your next business and finance tranche under the headings of, say, risk and strategy. But I'm not sure whether the services would necessarily also be covered under sub-tranches on this category of, for example, audit and assurance. So do you have any greater level of specificity about what is covered under each category? Or would I take it that it's probably best to apply for both?
Taking your second question first, yes. We've kept the definitions at a very high level so that we can be as flexible as possible in terms of what's covered by them. We appreciate that if you're looking for a lot of detail that you're not going to find it, because we have kept it very high level so that it's flexible as a solution for both agencies and our providers. So I think the answer is, if in doubt, apply.
Susan, you talked about the provider database. How will that provider database, you mentioned about CVs and work history to be captured over there. How will that provider database be structured for different suppliers of different sizes? Will different sort of transformation programs carried out by suppliers and things like that, will that be captured? And will the suppliers have a say on what goes inside and how the recommendation should sort of flow in?
We have panel directories for all of our services contracts, and in that we have a section where a provider can detail exactly those things. So where what their capabilities are as a provider, what their capacity is, what projects they have undertaken in the past, what projects they're capable of undertaking in the future. So we envisage that the provider database will capture that information as well. So the size of the provider and the capabilities and the capacity of that provider. It may capture it through PDF attachments and those kind of things, rather than single line entries in the database. But we do envisage that we'll capture that kind of information.